Antidepressants are stopping me from throwing myself off the nearest cliff.
I'd do anything to go back in time and not start taking them. Anything.
I wouldn't give up taking my medicine, even if I had 2 years without any symptoms.
Antidepressants don't solve problems, they just numb them.
The main problem is that many people wait too long before they gather enough confidence and try antidepressants.
It's just wrong to think they're harmless, because they really can do immense harm.
When it comes to antidepressants, who's right and who's wrong? Who do they help and how dangerous are they really? Mary's from Hamburg. She's taken antidepressants for 20 years, and she's been trying to stop for 18.
I was in my early 20s, and I got mononucleosis. But when it went away, I was left with low-level depression. Then I started getting stressed by things that hadn't ever bothered me before. I went to a neurologist and he prescribed antidepressants. I started to notice I had more energy again. So I went back to the doctor and said I didn't want to take them anymore. He said, okay, stop taking them. And I did. And that's when it started. I felt like my body was under immense stress. It was as if the devil was always chasing me. Nothing helped with the stress. I stood in the forest, shaking, because I just couldn't stand it. Every cell of your body is rocked by terror, and it just feels like you can't cope with it. You just can't bear it, but it doesn't stop. On and on and on and on.
Doctors eventually realized that Mary's anxiety began when she stopped taking antidepressants. Her body was in withdrawal, and still is.
You first blame your own mental state. I'd never have thought that stopping my medication could have had anything to do with it. No one told me about side effects, long-term issues, or problems giving them up. It was never mentioned. I just thought that if the doctor gives you something, a medication that is available in this country by prescription, it can't be that bad for you.
The number of prescriptions for antidepressants has gone up 8 times over the past 3 decades to about 1.7 billion daily doses a year, enough to supply Germany's entire population for 2 weeks. Professor Tom Schor wants to know what's caused this massive boom in antidepressants. He's one of Germany's leading researchers into antidepressant use. He's also a sought-after expert when it comes to treating depression. As a psychiatrist, he also studies whether people are being treated according to the latest recommendations.
You're taking antidepressants?
Correct.
And what are you taking?
Venlafaxine.
Venlafaxine. Why did you start taking antidepressants? Do you remember?
Yes, several deaths in our family. I couldn't be happy anymore.
Konnte nicht mehr fröhlich sein.
A difficult question, but I'll ask it anyway. What helped? The venlafaxine or conversations at the clinic? Or something else?
Both, I think. The venlafaxine pulled me out of the hole, but lots of talking and meeting people also did. I started feeling better.
Okay. That was 5 years ago. A provocative question. Why are you still taking venlafaxine?
Because of my psychologist. We've often discussed me giving it up. And she says you shouldn't stop too quickly.
They say that following a first severe bout of depression, a 12-month course of antidepressants should suffice. And you're way past that. It would be a good time to stop.
Professor Pschorr advises against taking medication longer than necessary, not least because of side effects, including weight gain and sexual issues. But he says too often prescriptions just keep flowing.
Have a nice day. Yes, most doctors think they're safe if they recommend people keep taking antidepressants. That's a lasting factor you see reflected in prescription numbers. But I don't think you can say this huge rise in antidepressant prescriptions is largely because everyone with depression is finally getting diagnosed and treated. Most cases of depression are just light to moderate cases, and you really shouldn't automatically treat light depression with medication.
It's like I eat, I drink, I take my tablets. It's part of my daily routine. It doesn't upset me or bother me that I'll be taking medication all my life. It doesn't affect my quality of life, because I know these pills give me a quality of life, or that they can restore it if severe symptoms start again.
Christina's from Leipzig and has been taking antidepressants for 23 years. She lived in a group home as a teenager after her mother took her own life. Depression appeared later in life.
I was in my early mid-30s when I had to give up what I thought would be my life. I suddenly couldn't look forward to anything. I knew a depressive episode could totally turn my life upside down at any time.
Christina needed several years to stabilize her mood, not just through medication, but also with meditation and psychotherapy.
Both key factors that can lead to depression play a role in mine. One is the experiences or events in life that have contributed to me suffering depression. The other is the imbalance of neurotransmitters in the brain.
That's what Christina was repeatedly told in the hospital. One of the transmitters is serotonin. It transmits information between brain cells. The serotonin hypothesis says that if levels are too low, transmission fails, and that can lead to depression. That's why almost all antidepressants increase the concentration of serotonin between cells. The theory is a simple one. The more serotonin you have, the less depressed you are.
It's a convenient hypothesis. It's easy to understand because you have a simple, apparently biological explanation and can say, I have a serotonin deficiency. For doctors, it also makes the consultations much easier. Listen, you have low serotonin, and I have a drug that'll increase it. It makes for an easy conversation. I think that's why it's so persistent and widespread. The problem is, it is totally, completely wrong.
And yet, the internet is awash with reports claiming serotonin deficiency causes depression, even though studies have failed to prove the hypothesis. No one actually knows what goes on in the brain during depression and how antidepressants influence the psyche. But science rejected the serotonin hypothesis long ago.
Many doctors will say they don't know if it's true. They have their doubts. But you notice that they're loath to completely reject this simple explanation out of hand.
The Alte Oper in Frankfurt, Germany is the site of a biennial convention of the German Depression Aid Foundation. People with depression and their relatives can come here for advice and talk to others about it. Professor Ulrich Hegel is a psychiatrist and chairman of the foundation. It's financed by donations and public funds. Hegel has turned to the media to increase public awareness of depression. Most are repeat visitors at the convention, which includes everything from musical entertainment to yoga tips and personal tales. The centerpiece is a series of seminars focusing on depression, its causes, and how to treat it correctly.
If you ask the general public, 95% will say depression is a result of personal tragedy, overwork, relationship issues. That's what people believe. And that's not quite wrong, but the significance is massively overestimated. If you only see depression as a result of difficult life circumstances, people tend to reject medication at the same time as blaming wrong decisions. People obviously aren't willing to try medication if they think their relationship is to blame. It's only when they understand that it also has links to the brain that they understand things better. It's a relief for many to realize that they're just unlucky. They're predisposed to this really stupid illness. And now they have to try and make the best of it, like others living with, for example, diabetes.
Hegel campaigned for years to increase the use of antidepressants.
People are usually skeptical. I often find an exaggerated skepticism towards antidepressants, so I don't see a risk of them being taken widely at an increased rate or frequency. I think the biggest problem is that many people wait too long before they decide to try them. I know many people who say that was the point that their life changed. I've met so many people who've missed out on thriving because they were scared, because they were told antidepressants aren't any better than a placebo, or that they'll become addicted. People are told all kinds of things and are scared much more than necessary.
Many attendees have personal experience with antidepressants.
I admit antidepressants helped me when I was really bad, but I suffered a lot of side effects. Impotence was the most unpleasant side effect, and my emotions felt dulled. I couldn't cry, and I didn't feel like me anymore.
The side effects were very strong. And it took a very, very long time for the actual benefit. It took a lot of patience.
Would you take antidepressants again?
Yes, I think I would, sure. But perhaps with better supervision and maybe a bit more. Well, I was lacking advice, really.
I think here you're pushed too much towards drugs. I'd like to hear more about subjects like spirituality, meditation, and all those other things outside the mainstream. I thought they were pretty weak here this morning, if I was honest. It's very one-dimensional. It's very pro-medication, and not enough about the downsides.
We've spoken to patients who said this is a very antidepressant-friendly event.
I think that shows this antipathy towards antidepressants. I feel like that's doing a lot of damage. I believe it. I've had to have this conversation with patients so often when I tell them to try them. And so many people were so grateful that they did.
Your opinion matters. There are people who rely on you.
Of course, I hope so. I hope that people listen, obviously, but I'm not telling them anything wrong.
Doesn't such an influential position mean you can't accept payments from pharmaceutical companies?
When did I last get a payment?
2021. One of your articles states, within the last 3 years, Ulrich Hegel was advisory board member of Janssen and speaker of Servier Medici, for example.
I'm in the fortunate situation that I'm not dependent on that at all. That was a speech for which I was paid 500 euros. That is a very, very small sum.
Sure, but it's been constant for years. Here's 2013, 2017 to 2021, where you worked for various pharma companies. Shouldn't that preclude you from doing what you're doing right now, being a mouthpiece?
I'm also an associate professor. We're also conducting research into antidepressants. That's run mostly by industry, and we're engaged in collaborative work. You can't avoid it.
But you personally get paid.
I haven't received a penny in 3 years.
That's from 2021.
The past 3 years. I'd have to look, but I haven't gotten anything in 3 years. There's no conflict of interest.
A footnote to a 2022 research article that Hegel contributed to says, Ulrich Hegel reported receiving money from Janssen, Servier, Bayer Pharma, and Medici outside and independent of the submitted work.
Everyone's convinced they won't be influenced. They think they make their own decisions. Everyone does. There are studies proving it. If you ask, do you think you're being influenced? They say no. If you ask if their colleagues would be influenced, yes. Everyone believes they're the only ones immune to influence, but it really affects your way of thinking and beliefs. And industry doesn't have money to burn. They think about where to invest. I can tell you that because I've done it and held seminars on it, and being paid by the pharmaceutical industry for it. I stopped it because at some point I couldn't have a clear conscience. I didn't think it was ethical to take any more money from the pharmaceutical industry.
What you don't hear on stage at the convention is anything about the growing doubt surrounding the effectiveness of antidepressants. Doubts that first arose in 2008. Psychologist Irving Kirsch was conducting research at Harvard University in Boston. He was testing whether antidepressants work better than placebos. A CBS documentary about his findings caused a firestorm of controversy.
A second study using data not only from the drug company's clinical trials that had been published in medical journals. This time, he got data that weren't published, but had been submitted to the FDA, which he got through the Freedom of Information Act.
These are the studies that showed no benefit of the antidepressant over the placebo. What they did is they took the more successful studies, they published most of them, they took their unsuccessful studies, and they didn't publish them.
Kirsch used the drug company's own information to show that for people with light or moderate depression, taking a placebo or real medication made no difference. Antidepressants don't work for them. Kirsch concluded that antidepressants only showed an effect in helping severe depression. Mary was one of those who for years believed the pills worked, until she came across other people's experiences on internet forums. They reported severe withdrawal symptoms every time they tried to give up antidepressants.
I just didn't believe it. I'd always just thought it was neurotic rubbish, that they were people with psychological disorders who found it easier to defame the drugs than look at themselves and deal with why they couldn't cope. That's what I thought.
Mary is a qualified psychologist and until recently worked in the outpatient department of a psychiatric clinic. She was never taught as a professional about withdrawal symptoms related to stopping the use of antidepressants.
I learned in my studies that these were non-habit-forming drugs. They didn't alter your personality or have side effects. That's what I learned, and I just used to parrot it all back at my patients, telling them that yes, they probably had low serotonin levels. I simply carried on repeating all that, unchecked, like every other psychologist. That's what you believe. At the same time, I was sitting there trying to pull myself together, just to function normally and speak normally to people and help them on the ward. I don't want to do it anymore. But I could have carried on. There were so many opportunities for me professionally. But I don't want to do that anymore, and I don't want to fight the system. I just don't want to. I just want to get better. And I don't want anything to do with these drugs.
Some clinics now take an alternative approach. The Center for Mental Health in Marienheide near Gummersbach in Western Germany has a ward where no antidepressants have been prescribed for 5 years, not even for severe cases. The head of psychology here, Professor Reinhard Maas, believes that depression is best explained by the events in people's lives. He works with patients to find the trigger and develop a treatment plan with various options. His approach is often quite unconventional.
What can I do to make myself feel worse? If I plan to feel really bad this evening by 8 p.m., say, be really depressed, what do I do?
I'd blame myself or stay in bed, just pull the covers up over my head, think about sad experiences.
Anything else?
Plan too much and then feel overwhelmed?
Then you're inside the downward spiral. It's really important to add more positive activities back into your daily life to generally become more active again. And that's independent of your mood.
But it's the everyday things, small things. You ask yourself, why don't I do it if it's going to make me feel better? If it makes me better, what's stopping me?
The trick is to be clear about why it makes sense and why it's important. I might not feel like going for a hike or a walk or painting a picture. I really don't feel like it, but I know it's the thing that will improve my condition. And then I do it. The most important thing is to start doing something again, because that is the start of the process that leads out of depression. It can be exhausting. It's hard work, just like pushing a car. But you do that because you know why you're doing it.
The clinic looked at its therapy success rates a few years ago, and by chance discovered that its approach was successful after studying the results of nearly 600 patients.
We discovered that antidepressants played no part in a successful therapy. It didn't make a difference whether you supplemented treatment with antidepressants or if you stopped taking them. Whether you kept taking them or didn't take any at all, the result was always the same. That led us to stop prescribing antidepressants to our patients. To me, it's even ethically problematic to recommend a drug with side effects and no beneficial effects. However, if patients want to continue to believe in them, we're not going to force our beliefs on them.
Johannes checked in 2 weeks ago with severe depression. He's a married 30-year-old father with 2 small children.
Last year, I realized my depression was like a monster keeping me prisoner. Everything looked black. I had no self-esteem left. It was like a poison arrow stuck in me. That poison spread and poisoned me with thoughts, and I couldn't think of anything else.
Johannes tried to cope with his depression by himself for a long time, until last year, when he knew he had to get help.
My family doctor excused me from work. He'd prescribed me my first antidepressants, but they weren't working. We switched to different ones, but I didn't feel anything, not even side effects. It was like taking sweets. Of course, it would be great if there was a tablet that simply healed depression. Just 2 short weeks on the sofa, drinking tea, and then you're healed. But that's not the case, unfortunately, no. I hope that here, together with the experts, I can create a roadmap that will help me get my life back on track. It's hard work, but hopefully it will be worth it in the end.
Because the tablets don't work, he wants to gradually stop taking them. German guidelines have recently begun recommending against prescribing antidepressants for light depression, but for moderate and severe illness, even though studies show their effectiveness is questionable.
You have to look at the studies. There are phase 3 studies, approval studies, in which antidepressants are compared to a placebo drug. And there is a difference between a placebo and the real thing. It might not be huge, but it exists, or they wouldn't be approved because they didn't work. If you want my opinion, from my clinical experience, I'm convinced that the effect is greater in everyday use. It's clear. As director of a clinic, you see most people leaving after 6 to 8 weeks, looking forward to going home to their families. They're able to enjoy things and do things again. It happens routinely. There's only a minority where you have to try something again, and even fewer where nothing works. That's less than 1 in 1,000, in my estimate. You can help most.
Sure, that's a claim that you hear again and again. But I put it like this. It is a claim. We don't have any scientific evidence to back it up. Particularly in a clinical setting, there's much more to it than simply the medication. They're in regular contact with people. They're talking to psychologists, with social workers, various forms of therapy. No one doubts that the depressive symptoms diminish there. But we just don't know whether that's due to effects of the medication or other factors. From my clinical experience, I don't see any scientifically convincing evidence for medication.
Dr. Michael Hengartner is researching depression at the Zurich Institute for Applied Sciences. For years, he's noted that all major studies on the effectivity of antidepressants show similar results.
Recently, the US Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, evaluated patients individually in the biggest study of its kind ever. And they showed once again that the average effect of treatment is really very small.
The 2022 study concludes that drugs only show significantly stronger effects than a placebo in just 15% of patients. In 85% of patients, that's not the case.
If I had depression myself, I would start by taking antidepressants. As soon as I start feeling better and am able to make changes to my life, I'd ask myself, are there areas, conflicts in my life where I repeatedly feel overwhelmed, situations I should consider changing? The knowledge that depression has something to do with brain function is very important, as is the presence of a disorder in the brain.
People look for treatments that treat the brain, but they forget the much wider social context and environmental factors. Social factors. Who are the people suffering from depression? Single mothers who are overwhelmed, who can't shoulder this double burden. It's people who've been unemployed long term and who see on TV and on social media what's possible in life, but who are stuck in poky, dark apartments and can't afford any of it. And in my view, that's where we fall short. Why? Because there's no funding for it. I mean, research is largely sponsored by the drug industry. But of course, there are social prevention measures, and they would represent competition for their products, because you don't take antidepressants until you have the disorder. If you can prevent the disorder, you wouldn't need the drugs, to put it bluntly.
Most research funding goes into pharmaceutical and medical studies, says Hengartner. All this research has been unable to explain what happens in the brain with depression, but antidepressant prescriptions continue to grow. Not least because depression is often wrongly diagnosed.
What we can say is that many moods that are ultimately diagnosed as depression do not, in actual fact, fulfill the criteria for depression. And that's the problem. You go to the doctor, and it's not exactly clear whether it's depression or is an easily explainable feeling of dejection. You get a diagnosis during a relatively short consultation, and in 10 minutes, you've got a prescription. The largest group of antidepressant takers are people with light and subclinical forms, because they're the most common. And we have no scientific evidence that medication is helping this group of sufferers. That's the problem we face today.
Mary is gradually lowering her dosage. Every day she does the same thing. She dissolves her antidepressants in water and drinks a carefully measured amount. Every couple of weeks, she reduces it even more. Mary's now found a doctor who's helping her to give up her tablets, a process that she has long struggled with.
I'm happy you came.
It's been 4 very extreme years where I've been more or less stuck. And I'm sick of it. At the moment, I'm getting lots of physical symptoms, and sometimes really extreme. I think I've got flu, but an hour later it's all over. Usually, I'm not that sensitive.
Yes, the physical flu-like symptoms are typical when you stop taking them. Acutely, and then also later. It's not the first time I've heard that. 56% of people who take antidepressants are affected by acute and chronic problems giving up. That's meta-analysis from London University and Switzerland.
I'm really relieved to hear that. Having a medical professional confirm that, it puts a different light on things. You're not just saying, I'm someone with psychological problems who just has to accept it.
Exactly. Often patients are labeled as psychologically ill, but they're actually just having medical withdrawal. They're told there's something wrong with them.
Sagen denen, mit dir ist irgendwas falsch.
There are people who try to make a huge fuss about withdrawal. In normal healthcare, it's a tiny problem. We have countless patients here who stopped taking their medication without showing any kind of dependency. I would say there's a greater risk of the depression returning if you stop taking it, because it works against depression. And if people stop taking it, the risk of a setback increases. And that is the best explanation.
Knowledge surrounding withdrawal symptoms is not that widespread among doctors. There's always the danger that people mistake withdrawal symptoms with the return of depression and think they have to start taking them again. That certainly happens a lot. And that's what I find concerning about the ever-growing number of prescriptions. It's potentially a sign of how difficult it is to get off antidepressants. There are more and more patients starting them, while hardly anyone giving them up.
Christina has decided to not just see her depression as an illness, but as an opportunity to help. She advises other people with depression and their families by telling them about her experience with the illness, and she listens.
You know you're unwell. And then you decide to address the problem, but you just end up feeling more and more helpless.
That's typical with depression. It really changes a person.
People sometimes want to discuss whether they should or shouldn't take antidepressants. Christina tells them about her experience with them, that she's never had bad side effects, that she sees them as a reliable weapon against depression, even though her illness keeps coming back. It's the last day of Johannes's drug-free antidepressant therapy. His 10-week treatment program is almost over. He's just going to this final embodiment group.
Roll your head a few times gently this way and that.
He's been learning how to use his body to influence his psyche. He's then asked to discuss his goals once he leaves.
I'd really like to be more relaxed, more stress-resistant, and not have the feeling that everything is an insurmountable mountain.
What do you want instead of the stress?
I hope to be more capable. I want to be more dependable.
So, I want to be more confident and dependable by being aware of my abilities and challenges, to control my abilities, and by taking a break at the right moment. How does that sound to you?
Yes, that sounds like me.
That sounds right. Sounds like what you want to achieve, what you have to face now.
Yes, absolutely.
Johannes will go home with a complete set of tools to fight his depression. They include very simple measures that can help counter depression.
For example, structuring your day with one simple principle. Every day is achievable, and every day a positive experience, doing something that you used to enjoy. Getting up early, regardless of whether you'd had a bad night. That's effective against depression. And not letting surfing on the laptop at 3 in the morning be the most active part of your day. That's really harmful. Activity and mobility is good. You can easily build that into your daily structure. These are a few cardinal rules that you can try instead of taking antidepressants straight away and still be successful.
I'm doing fine. I shocked myself because I'm allowing myself to feel joy again, to laugh again, to look forward to things again. And it was like a light switch being flicked, honestly. You're not an awful guy, and you have a right to live, and you're fine as you are. I've been off antidepressants for several weeks. I had a few side effects when I stopped. I realized they weren't just Smarties. I sat on a chair in the cafeteria and I felt really dizzy. I thought I was going to fall. I had to really hold on. I felt sick. I often felt like I was going to throw up. It was just really hard to deal with.
Es war eigentlich kaum auszuhalten. Johannes is determined. He won't take medication again, even if the depression returns.
I'm going to get going now. I'm going. Good, all the best. I'm really looking forward to the time I can really spend with my family again. I almost want to cry with joy. Again, to be with them again. They're the best thing that ever happened to me. Hey, I'm coming home now. I'm still wary about the day-to-day stuff. I'm not so sure about that. Can I do it? I'm hopeful, even if I'm a little hesitant.